Thought I was gonna blow up or something.
Yeah, just one second.
Okay, to get to my residence, I drive past probably the largest cell tower with the biggest array of cell antennas in the borough. I drive past it 4 or 5 times a day, and most of the time I don't even notice it. And I've done that for the past 5 years. I've worked in government for over 30 years, 21 years as a Juneau police officer, and over 10 years as a code compliance manager in Queen Creek, Arizona. I had the privilege of standing up the Queen Creek Code Compliance Division. My team and I were tasked with enforcing health and sanitation ordinances along with zoning ordinances. Queen Creek was mostly farmers and cowboys, not much different than fishermen. So I had to be creative in how we approached them with their overgrown weeds or junk cars. Okay, and that was kind of my job. We created a program to teach and encourage residents to maintain their properties. Once a year, we put on a gardening and landscaping show with various landscape professionals. At the show, we gave out rewards to various residents who had done well with their landscapes. I say all this to illustrate we work to obtain compliance by education and encouragement. We sought out ways to not force compliance. In 1979, I got to take part in a distinctly Alaska outdoorsman's pastime called self-rescue. My wife at the time and I took our 17-foot skiff over to Admiralty Island to hunt deer for a few days. We planned on using the tram to get to the Oliver Inlet side. We loaded our gear onto the tram, began pushing it to the cabin. I used the tram the previous year with another friend, and it would jump the track every few hundred feet, and it never got going very fast. So we piled our gear on it, started pushing the tram. Well, they repaired the tram during the summer, I guess, and the tram got going pretty fast. And the only part that they didn't repair was the brake for the cart. And we were riding on the cart, and it jumped the track. My wife did a face plant into the railing. She had a serious head wound. I patched her up the best I could and began running our gear back to the skiff. The fact that tide was going out lent a great deal of urgency to that situation. Not knowing the extent of her injuries, I needed to get her back to Juneau. The weather was bad, so the boat ride was a bit harrowing. I got us back to town, took her to the hospital for treatment. At that time, there were no cell phones. The only way to get help was with a flare or a UHF radio signaling a boat or a plane that passes by. There are areas in this borough, especially out the road, where cell service is non-existent. I can tell you without reservation that if one of my grandkids or my kids was involved in an accident and needed help, I would allow my residents to look like a porcupine with cell tower antennas to make sure that they were able to get help. I'm fairly sure most of you would do the same. I urge you to find a way to facilitate these towers. We need to encourage and facilitate infrastructure improvements to our community, not look for excuses to restrict such improvements. I hope there are more opportunities to partner with Tlingit Haida and others to expand and enhance the development of our community. If you have a rollover out there and you can't get to the road and there's no cell service, somebody's going to have a problem. So I don't know on the placement of these towers anything about where it would be better or worse, but I understand most of the land's already purchased and they're permitted and ready to go. I would like to have cell service out there because my kids and grandkids do go out that road frequently and sometimes maybe faster than they should. So thank you for the opportunity to make these comments.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else would like to talk to? Go ahead, please.
I've got several points I'd like to make about this cellular proposal. I know that people are concerned, especially around Long Rory's Road, with the potentially obnoxious visual appearance of a tower in their neighborhood. Not to mention their concerns about radiation hazards. I have a pretty extensive career in radio communications, satellite earth stations, the White Alice site, where coincidentally the frequencies used are the same as cellular circuits, 800, 900 megahertz. Admittedly, the power there was a lot greater. It was a 10,000 watt transmitters, and there was hazardous radiation signs all around the antennas. I worked on VHF radios in small communities from Tennecky Springs to Kasan, and from Wrangell to Port Alexander, Point Baker, Port Protection, and what have you. Microwave antennas or microwave radios here in Petersburg and in Wrangell. Microwave repeaters at Gunnock Mountain and Duncan Canal. And so I've been around a lot of radiation things. I learned once upon a time where a technician was working on a radar of a freighter. He was on top of the wheelhouse and he had the rotation of the radar stopped so he could work on it. And it happened to be pointing up forward, and it ignited a bunch of fluorescent tubes that were in crates and started a fire. Once my electronic shop was next to the Harbor Bar and Liquor Store, and had a high school fellow, Bill Bennett at that time, who became a head pediatrician at Stanford Medical Center. But I had installed a Marine 60 watt Raytheon Marine radio for Ray Olson in his pickup. And I got Bill Bennett to come out to key the transmitter for me. And I held a 2-foot long fluorescent tube next to the antenna and lit it. Then it was about 9 o'clock at night and dark. I could walk most of the way across the street before the lamp went out. I'd have to go back and hold it near the antenna to light it again. About that time, there was a couple of guys, snockered guys, coming out of the bar with their arms over each other's shoulders, and they saw me standing out there with that light. They almost went all the way to the ground. Had a service call once to the home of a logger who had a Marine band radio in his home, and the problem was that there was a lamp that would glow in their house. And so I kind of checked things out and decided that there was really no problem, that they could unscrew the light bulb. Excuse me, the radiation from the Marine radio was getting into some of the house wiring to light this bulb. So I suggested they could unscrew the lamp, or they could just leave it there. And it gave them a good indication that the transmitter is working. And when the transmitter was modulated, the lamp would even vary in brightness, so it was a pretty good deal. I feel like that there's pretty adequate coverage of cellular service in this town. And I've had the experience of having to call for help once. That was when I was in kind of dire straits. And there's the need. I wonder if they've conducted much of a survey of the need for these towers and new sites. I believe that there's a cellular site on Lindenberg Mountain and on Crystal Mountain, which cover a wide area. There's a cell tower right next to Hammer and Weekon grocery store that's hardly 200 yards from the proposed tower by the fire hall. So another thing that bothers me is that in light of all of their plans, which are evidently sponsored in large part by U.S. government and in competition with private enterprise, which has been doing a good job to provide the service. So I guess that's basically all I had to say. I just hope if that cell tower is built out there on Rory's Road, that their chickens don't lay hard-boiled eggs. So thank you.
Thank you. Harvey, for the record, would you state your name, please?
Harvey Gilliland.
Thank you, Harvey. Hey, is there anybody else that would like to talk to issues related to the cell towers?
Good evening. My name is Nicole McMurrin. A little bit rambly, I think, trying to put thoughts together, but I attended the listening session last evening with Tidal, and I learned a few things after I scrambled because they had removed the link from their website. And so luckily someone forwarded me the link, but you had to be on Facebook to find the link. So that didn't start me off with a robustly good feeling. But I did learn a few things. One was I had been under the impression that the grant required them to utilize their own tower rather than being able to share a tower that is currently existing. And I asked that question pointedly of Rain. And they said, no, they can actually, in fact, make use of existing towers. And I thought that that was a good piece of information, particularly in light of them wanting to put a tower in town, and noting, just building off of what Harvey just shared, other towers that are existing. I asked if all towers, well, it found out for the first time that they are, like, the plan is to build 3 towers in town. Also not information that's readily available on their website, which one might think they would be if they were interested in having a transparent process. And I asked if, if project success was dependent on the establishment of all 3 of those towers. And the response that I got was no, that wasn't necessarily the case. I didn't really get into how they might hop, skip, and jump if all 3 weren't in existence, but I asked a question about what dollars would be utilized to maintain these sites, given that the sites to build, the dollars to build the towers are grant dollars. And as an example, they offered up that, rural subsidies had been yanked back for internet service. And I said, this is, if you're planning on using grant dollars for maintenance, this isn't a fabulous example. And what was the plan? And the idea that they put forward was that they would maintain the towers based on funds that they would make from leasing the towers to other entities, which sort of looped me back to, this is why we want to build our own towers and not necessarily make use of towers that are currently in existence. I learned that they, I recognize that there are likely benefits from increased services and having more access. And I don't think that we can just, put that aside. My concerns are largely process and precedence-based. Process-wise, they admitted a misstep in not having a community session much earlier in this whole shebang. I think that they've been speaking with the borough and they've been speaking with private landowners, but we haven't really had a robust idea of what the scope of the project was. I was, the last planning and zoning meeting I attended in January, the public was somewhat chided on, gee, we've gone through these readings, about selling land on Haugen, where were you then? Well, had we been more robustly informed, perhaps more people would have stated objection or at least concern or an interest in finding out more about the project. I think another concern of mine is that's in regard to processes. We don't currently have ordinances that address this type of infrastructure development. And the Planning and Zoning Commission is currently trying to do some work to establish that. And I'm wondering why we are working so hard to be beholden to a private interest. These are folks, the question was just brought up, how is the need described? And that question was asked several times last night. And my takeaway was they are establishing the idea of service gaps, not necessarily based on a map of where other providers are providing service and there's gaps in that. They're saying we as an entity are not providing service in this area. Therefore, there's a service gap. Our ordinances are not up to date. We are not beholden to them. And by precedence, I don't think it's wise to turn over our public use land for private entities when we are not solving a problem that our community itself has identified. Thanks for your time and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else? Harvey, I'll give you one more chance here and then
I don't need another 5 minutes, but I just neglected to say that there's a cell site at the top of Hungerford Hill, which also does a lot to cover our area.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to talk to the issues of cell towers?
My name is Jackie Tyson, and I've mentioned this to you folks before, that in all the reading and research I've done since I found out that Papke's Landing was a target, that 1/4 mile distance does a lot to protect people. And I think of the location, I was shocked that it's right next to the fire station. It's right across from the hospital, the new hospital. It's very close to that. It's right across from the post office. It's across very short distance to Alaska Airlines and all those employees that work there all day long. They're going to be exposed to this radiation that some people like Clinton Haida say that there's no problem with it. Well, I've done extensive research and I don't sleep at night because I know what can happen with this. And you folks that live, I mean, it's just incredible that we're going to have 3 cell towers in such a short distance, and none of them respect the 1/4 mile distance that is always recommended. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And if there's anybody else, please come forward, state your name and who you represent.
My name is Marcia Cook. The thing that stands out to me is I'm hearing about all these are in the town boroughship, however you want to say it, township and the borough. And what our need is, it seems to me, in town you've got all your telephone cell tower entities, and Starlink, NM. Everybody talks about we don't have service out the road. That's where people run into trouble. That's where when I go out there, I'm scared to death. When I go hunting, I tell my husband and I tell Cody where I'm going to be at in case there's a problem. I want them to know where I'm at. So I don't think our need is for all these towers in town by the child care and the hospital and all of those things. They need to be out where they could be utilized, where people actually get served, need the service. I mean, we live out and we use Starlink. But I can understand when people go out the road, unless you have a little mini Starlink or something, you could still, and you're out hiking in the woods or whatever, you're not getting that cell service. And I think if anything, we shouldn't be looking at cell towers in town where we're already got so many choices. We should be looking out the road in different places where the necessity is at.
Thank you very much. Anybody else would like to talk to the issue on cell towers?
Say, I'm sorry, but this is kind of important. I did a little search on the effects of these things, and they can be significant. Could cause depression, anxiety, mental problems, and on. If you did a search about what these things can do to you. And so if these things can do that, imagine what a stronger signal, that the signal from these is in microwatts, not more than 1 watt. And imagine what these towers could be that are producing a lot more power. So anyway.
Okay, thank you, Harvey. Is there anybody else who would like to talk to issues on cell towers? Please come forward and state your name and who you represent.
Hi, Paul Dupree. I kind of want to touch base on the tower up on Mill Road. Kind of speaking on behalf of everybody in that area. Of course, we all want it removed. The pedestal's up, but there's nothing on top yet. And I don't know how you guys could do that, but I think the borough's going to have to probably cough up some land elsewhere. And, they can donate that land and you guys, might have to, pay for the construction to get that, to get it up elsewhere. I think that's the best, the best way to remove that, because they're still gonna want their tower somewhere. And I think you just gotta give them an option. It's gonna cost the borough a lot of money, but I think in the long run, it's gonna be better. So I think you guys are at a point where if nothing happens, there could potentially be some sort of lawsuit coming at the city. Do some research around the states. There's towns are winning lawsuits, or the community, the people of the community are winning against the city over this kind of stuff. So I think it's something you guys should seriously consider, donating some land elsewhere away from town, and just go from there. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to talk to the issue?
Yeah, hi, Tom Kowalski, speaking for myself. Just like the fellow before me, I live on Cornelius near the mill site. And there is a cell phone tower, I don't know, maybe 1,400 feet to the south of me. And this tower that they're building is only a couple 100 foot from my property. And before the tower went up, I looked at the area that I lived in for 4 years before the tower, and I could see some potential, and the potential really exists in the fact that there's a growing neighborhood around Mill Road, and properties on Mill Road slowly turning more residential type. Going up Mill Road, you can't find any industry on Mill Road. I think there's a guy that welds in his shop, and there's some gear sheds, but really there's no industry. That road, the properties adjacent to that road, and all the residential neighborhoods surrounding it as a unit shows positive growth, a lot of positive growth in the last 10 years. Not unlike Papke's, also seeing a lot of positive growth out there. And I want you to consider the cost versus the benefit of having a tower on Mill Road. The tower is practically obsolete even before it went up. It's going to use Starlink to provide its service. Most of us out there that don't utilize GCI or won't use the AT&T fiber optic cables, we already have the Starlink. We pitched out $500, $600 for the equipment. So it's not going to be cost effective for us to switch to this Starlink program. And like I mentioned, we are well covered. We have 2 types of fiber optics. If one gets cut, there's a second one. And then there's Starlink. And now Starlink offers free satellite equipment. So I want you to consider the cost, what it's going to cost to keep that tower there. It very well will diminish property values nearby. We've heard an expert that lives here, that sells properties here, testify to that effect. And there's plenty of literature if you were to look online for it. And with the property values, there's also the hardships in trying to sell properties or sell homes. You're likely to see that homes and properties near the tower will have a hard time selling. So, there's going to be a time when that area may have been very attractive for a rezoning from industrial to a light industrial residential. Maybe over time, not my generation or your kids' generations, but the generations to come, that could be a vibrant neighborhood. And I want you to consider the cost of that tower and the benefit. What's the benefits? For me, there aren't any benefits. There may be some people that live out there that will benefit from that tower, yes, but it won't be me. And it won't be a lot of people out there. So please consider the costs versus the benefits. How much it might cost to relocate that tower. How much it's going to cost if that tower stays. properties don't sell, where are people gonna go to adjust that? And I think that's all I have to say. The other thing I want to say is most everybody that's going to come up here and talk, and most people that have been talking in a very objective light. I did hear somebody in favor of the towers last night during that Zoom, but that was just one person who may have a conflict of interest. And anyway, please consider these things. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else would like to talk to the issue on tidal network and cell towers?
Hi, I'm Sarah Holmgren. I'm a resident out at Papke's, and so my comments are going to be mostly directed toward that tower's construction. Just some thoughts that maybe haven't, and I'm not even sure if the borough has any, even if they wanted to do something about it, whether they have any power out there anyway, because we're outside of Service Area 1, but just some things to consider. That the Papke's Landing region is outside of Service Area 1, and this creates a legal contradiction because Tidal Networks Tower will rely on borough-provided emergency responses in the event there was a situation out there. And the borough is not legally authorized or funded to provide. I would argue that the tower is a critical infrastructure site. If you've got a 100-foot communication tower, some things should be required or guaranteed, such as police response for trespass, vandalism, or security issues, EMS response in the event of a worker's injury, fire department response for generator fires, battery incidences, or structural emergencies. And because the borough lacks both the authority and taxation capacity in this area, approving or supporting the tower exposes the borough. It becomes an unfunded liability, forced emergency response outside its legal boundaries, outside of Service Area 1. There are some other, you could get into, maybe the tower will be there forever and never have a problem, but they are at risk of structural failures in a storm or a fire risk for backup power systems, electrical hazards, remote access. If someone is injured out there, security incidences and trespassing and equipment theft or vandalism, to name a few. Another thing to point out is the NTIA grant requirements say that there has to be an unserved household benefit, and Tidal Networks infrastructure is being funded through that grant. But the tower they said the tower is going to supposedly directly benefit unserved Native households, but direct service improvement for tribal residents in the proximity of the tower and its locations. But I would argue that Papke's Landing area contains extremely low residential density with minimal numbers of unserved households and no significant tribal population concentration. So is this tower actually being placed where NTIA funded engineering plan said it would serve these underserved households or not? I would argue that it's non-compliant with that federal award. It's not aligned with the underserved household impact that they're claiming that they're going to be serving. Finally, under NEPA or the State of Alaska Title 38 and borough land use responsibilities, some things that should be transparent are environmental impact, the public access and roadway traffic increase that may happen there, fire hazard mitigation, structural failure zone modeling, and impacts on the neighbors' properties, which we've already kind of talked a little bit about tonight, and I did previously, of the potential impact for real estate values. Because the tower is located within the borough boundaries, but is outside the borough's only authorized public safety areas, there is a legal contradiction of unfunded emergency obligations that the borough would then potentially be responsible for liability exposure. And then, of course, the questions is on their entire grant. So those are just some of the issues or concerns that I have. I don't foresee that the borough can actually do anything about it. The more I dig into it, I just want it to become a public conversation, or at least in the back of our minds as Tidal Network moves forward with some of this, is that do you realize that the borough is not responsible if you have a problem out there? They do not have to respond. They don't have any legal obligation to respond, although I would argue you probably will anyway, as the goodness of your hearts. For the people that work at the fire, that are volunteers and our police, but they are not legally required to. And this should be a moment for Tidal to pause, but I'm just more saying it so it's a public conversation, knowing that you probably don't have much authority to do anything about it. But I appreciate your time and having this work session so we can voice our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else would like to talk to towers and cell phone or tonight?
Jackie Tyson again. One of the concerns that I had, that I'd heard in all of this conversation with title, is that they think that that lot where the flower farm is on hard pan. I might have said this before, but it's 12 feet deep on my side, 12 feet deep on John Baird's side. John Murgis's house is on piling. So is the Kensington's, which is right next door. And when I spoke last night to Plinkett and Haida, I don't know if they have to show me that, but from what I read, the plan that they have is they're just gonna lay down something on top of that and put the tower on there. So of course, I've been going to sleep at night going, if I can go to sleep, what if that tower falls over? How close is it gonna be to my property? Is it gonna be on my property? Is it gonna block the road? It's not a very well thought out plan that they have there that I don't even know what it is yet. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room that would talk about, would like, Judy, please come forward.
Kind of marvel at tonight getting to the point where we actually get to work with you in a special session like this. When I first stood up in mid-October, it was a real different situation, and I appreciate all that's been done to this point. Early on, we talked about, okay, service area 1, and we're not in it, meaning out, out the road further. We talked about what it would take to become another service area so we could have more protection and more representation from the borough that we belong to. And city manager, if I'm quoting you right, you said it'd be about 3 years for a service area to be constructed, but 3 months to get plating authority. And I'd still like to have that looked into. Had we done it in October, we'd be in a different place with it right now. The borough, well, they say that, or we've heard, we don't have authority out there and everything. What you do have is the authority of the borough itself, where were I to call them and ask them to relocate the tower, it's just me asking for something like that. Where you speak with the authority of the borough, not necessarily telling them they have to do that, but encouraging another placement, because there's been tremendous outcry about that location in particular, along with Mill Road, and starting with, with the Haugen Drive one in relation to sustained proximity to the towers for people. And that's where a lot of the danger comes in. I know we can't speak to the health issues according to federal law or whatever it is, and environmental issues, but we can sure talk with title about kind of the good neighbor policies and goodwill in the community and things like that, and encourage that. Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously to encourage the borough assembly to enter into talks with title about relocating that tower. And there's a lot of reasons for it, really. I mean, Sarah Holmgren mentioned some of the emergency necessities. Out there, we don't have city water, we don't have fire hydrants, we don't have fire protection. And these towers, if you look at anything about it, I mean, another one just went up in flames. Again, it happens. Not every one, not every week, but it happens. And out there, we're left very unprotected. And while there aren't covenants on our side of the road and there aren't ordinances in the borough to protect us, it's still pretty ominous to think that someone can move into your neighborhood and create something that's a danger. I know Haynes went through some about how far setbacks should be and things, and they came to like 150% of the height of the tower. Out there, they're looking at 150 feet, so if your house is within 225 feet, the tower shouldn't be there. According to the Haynes lawyer that stripped away the 1,500-foot setback that the people wanted. In terms of lawyers, just caution there's so much specialty in this kind of thing. And the lawyers at Children's Health Defense, that was my first phone call when I learned about the towers back in October. They can give you a free consult on this specifically, and we don't have to take the word of someone in another city who that may not be their specialty. I think that's a place to look. When we came into this meeting, several of the assembly members said, well, what do you want the borough to do? That's one that I would really recommend, is that another lawyer that has dealt with these all over the country is Cal Washington. We can get you a number for that deal with the specifics of what we're faced with right now and scrambling because our ordinances are way out of date. I still want to go back to that idea of what do we want for Petersburg instead of having to work around our future over what title wants for us. A lot of that came up in the listening session last night on the Zoom call. So my request would be that you look at relocating the towers away from homes and those, there's a word for it, where they're specially susceptible to the dangers. The borough has a strong voice when it's worked before with getting the state lands and mental health lands like they did for the shooting range. Today we were in contact with DNR and talked with Andrew Miller. Very, very helpful. He said he's already in negotiations with the city on transfers and that it's a pretty easy thing to do. And while it's not an immediate process, that the borough can get, forget what he called them, I have all that paperwork, but you can get a use for it with the intention of following through on that. And I would highly recommend that. Okay, well, I wanted to go into a whole lot of what new information came out of the listening session. If there's a chance for a few more minutes, I'll come back up.
Okay, go ahead. I think if you want to unmute Becky Knight, I believe Becky's online.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Becky,
Hi.
go ahead.
Hi. This is in no particular order, but if acceptable health, safety, emissions, plane traffic, conflicts, aesthetics to the public locations cannot be found, it seems to me the assembly has every right to say thanks, but no thanks. I don't consider this, in a way, this proposal is a private enterprise, but they're using taxpayer-funded dollars. And so the public has every right, every single right to endorse or object to this project. And in my case, I object to it in its entirety. I don't think it's needed. I don't think that Alaska has, every square inch of Alaska has to be covered by cell phone coverage. When I go out the road quite a bit, and I often am annoyed when I think I'm in a dead spot and I hear my phone ding or ring or whatever. I enjoy the peace and solitude. Okay, and then secondly, has my question, maybe Liz can answer this or the city manager, if locations up by the dump or the reservoir road have been explored, or the water tower up there, and that would be completely away from people, with the exception of some people that work at the dump proper or the water treatment facility, but it seems to me it could be located far enough away up there, and it's high. And also regarding title's application, which is, I don't know, 75% or more redacted, I think the city should formally request an unredacted copy. I know there are, the gal last night talked about proprietary information. When full pages, page after page after page, are redacted, that something doesn't smell right. And I think it's incumbent upon the assembly to ask for that information. And also who deemed it proprietary information. I mean, that something ain't right there. Anyway, and then they acknowledged last night that they failed to work with the public early on. The project needs a reset back to the beginning stages of project planning. Would they do that? That's a question to ask. And I think we all know the answer, but I think it's important to put it out there. And basically what they said last night, well, we're sorry we didn't get with you earlier, but here's how we plan to do it. And then I think the assembly needs to ask for the copies of the specific studies that they used to arrive at the specific conclusions that they cited in public. And those studies should not be funded by special interest that are going to benefit. And then, let's see, finally, like how emissions will not harm public health, and explain why their no harm studies are more valid than the mountain of current research that concludes otherwise. And finally, I'd ask them to provide the studies, not the wordsmith narratives or verbal assurances by special interest that demonstrate there's really a demand for their product. Anyway, thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else that would like to talk to issues on cell towers? Please come forward, state your name and who you represent.
Good evening. My name is John Mergus. I'm speaking for myself. And yeah, I think just about all of us here have nothing against Tidal Network or cell phone towers and so forth. But our main concern is location. And in cooperation with companies that come in, no matter who they are, we'd like to work with them to find suitable locations for their towers. Yeah, I go to Hammers and drive by the airport subdivision daily, and my interest is price of a gallon of milk. I'm not too much paying too attention to the towers, but that exposure is just for a few minutes. But when you're home, your family, your children, everybody is only less than 100 feet from a tower, and the new ones are going to be 5G towers, which are much different than the existing ones. It gets you, that needs to be, that's the main concern, is the location. And at Papke's, that tower will be located less than 100 feet from residences. So that's a red flag. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else would like to talk to cell towers and the issues related to? Okay. Yep, one more, Judy, and then we'll move on.
Judy Omer, continuing on. Last night they did their listening session, and they did start with a bit of an apology about not involving the community. They're seeing that is an important piece of this. They said that their grant runs through October of this year, 26, but that they're looking at getting an extension of 2 years in order to build out. So I don't know that Petersburg needs to be in a crisis to meet the, what they're trying to do right now based on that timeline if we've got more time in order to do it. We don't have to be in a rush. We can take a longer time to figure some of these things out in terms of what future we want for Petersburg. Some of the things that we learned last night in listening to them was the question of the tribal lands, because that's come up many, many times. And what they said was, well, because Alaska doesn't have reservations and then added, except for Metlakatla, but that then all of Alaska is considered tribal lands. And that's a different definition than I think any of us have operated on. In terms of gaps, which comes up all the time, every time planning and zoning or you guys meet. And they talked about, it's not a certain gap where between 6 and 8 Mile, we don't have any connection. It's that each of the service providers say where they don't have, they're not servicing some people. And so they said their gap is 100%. And their connectivity is 0. And so they're really coming in as a new telecom service and want to be able to put their towers where they want to put their towers and serve. The question would be, who? Are they going to take customers away from GCI and APT and AT&T and all of the other things and go to Tidal, which then comes back to, they have $50 million of taxpayer money. And are we then agreeing that they can come in, start their business on our tax dollars and compete with the people that have already put infrastructure in here? So I think it's a concern. Another one that was clear was in their grant application that is, I'd say 90% redacted. I lost a lot of ink printing that out. That there's a lot of misleading things in how they requested the money. And they pretty much acknowledged that last night, saying that grant application went in 21, and now things have changed. Just like the cost of internet, they quoted at $500 for a single, residence, $1,700 a month for a business. Well, those figures came out of like Pelican and Edna Bay, where they don't plan to build a tower anyway, because they want to build where there's roads and there's already electricity in place. So anyway, those are some of the new learns we got out of last night.
Thank you. Anybody else like to talk to issues on cell towers? Please come forward, state your name and who you represent.
My name is Kirsten Dupree and I represent myself. I've been searching through the last 4 years through the newspaper archives. There was one article, and that was in 2022 when they got their money. And until then, there was nothing until 2025 in the newspaper for us to see anything about. I found on the Planning Commission reports, Tidal Network is proposing to develop wireless Wi-Fi towers on Mitkoff Island to improve internet service in underserved areas. We're not underserved. Within that same Planning Commission, they were hoping to get in rural residential a change to the conditional use permits. That would be, they wanted to add communication, radio, and television transmitters or towers. So all of us in rural residential, would we have been notified if that was changed? Would we have been able to speak to that? That was kind of scary. They sent to all you guys, I believe. It says here, population estimate is 3,427. Tlingit-Haida estimate is 458. Underserved population percentage estimate is 7%. Estimated housing units, 1,753. Estimated households, 1,259. Estimated persons per household, 3. Houses with broadband internet service, sub-estimate 82%. They want to do 4 sites in Petersburg. This is in this paperwork that you can find on the internet. I think this is under planning and zoning. So it's there. In their application, they said, Tlingit and Haida bid, as with this, they say further on, they want to do 100% of the coverage in our area. That's what they're aiming for. We don't need that. We have coverage. Tlingit and Haida bid proposal provides qualifying broadband service to 100% of unserved households in its service areas within its tribal lands. That is all of Southeast Alaska. Tlingit and Haida will offer those services in other service areas unless there is either an objection or a duplication. Are we not objecting, and is this not a duplication? They determined that there will be 32 towers required for all service areas, subject to detailed engineering and post-award field work. They expect that 25 new towers will require full construction. The 7 existing towers will be required for coverage and service provisions. I don't like what's going on. As my son said, they need to take it down. It's too close to people. It's too close to my grandkids. They can put them elsewhere if they're going to do it. We don't need it. We don't need it, and they're pushing it down our throats. Thank you.
Thank you. After we're done, could I see that one page when we are done? That one, thank you. Does anybody else? Okay. David, David Beebe's online. David, you got the floor.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
All right. Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak, and on behalf of the defense of, as well as the premises, function, and role of local representative government. I must say, these are certainly very interesting times. Speaking from the experience of a Vietnam-era veteran, septuagenarian, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, I'm also a continuous 40-year resident, commercial fisherman, subsistence-dependent rural resident. But as far as emergency services dependent upon cell service, I already have universal emergency response by way of Garmin satellite service without requiring even a cell phone. I'm compelled to raise the perspective of a term likely unfamiliar to most people. The term is known as shifting baselines. Shifting baselines refers to the gradual generational change in perspective, often in terms of what was once considered normal in our lived natural environment cannot be known by those who will never know the scale of what has been lost. However, this concept applies to our cultural and political environment as well. What I refer to in this testimony and our expectations and cultural norms without understanding the scale of change from what once existed but has since been lost. By the way, I'm familiar with cumulative radiation exposure as a hospital corpsman aboard a ship that involved nuclear weapons. And we all wore radon badges for that. But I would ask the borough to realize that we no longer have what has been referred to as the social contract. The social contract was formulated in the 15th century and is widely accepted by social scientists to continue to exist as an enduring implicit agreement among the members of a society to cooperate and comply by relinquishing certain freedoms under certain conditions in exchange for social benefits. These benefits, for example, involve protections, which includes the social safety net, affordable public health, public safety, public education, all in the interest of sustaining domestic tranquility. And now for the antithesis of the social contract. In all likelihood, most of you are unaware of several bills in Congress. H.R. 2289, known as the American Broadband Deployment Act, aims to streamline the deployment of broadband infrastructure across the United States. The bill has been advanced by the House Committee on Energy and Commerce and is currently under consideration. It has also been dubbed the Cell Tower Antennas Everywhere Act. And recently, this is being advanced under the flag of the digital divide and the underserved of Native tribal members. but is now expanded into an all-inclusive, all residents of what Tlingit and Haida Central Council's version of tidal network is actually the tidal wave. So what I urge the assembly to consider is we no longer have the principles of the social contract. In fact, what we have are elected representatives who are defending the antithesis of the social contract. And I highly recommend that you take a pause and understand this in terms of the shifting baselines, in terms of the cumulative exposures that are not actually represented in the safety standards of the FCC itself. Think about this. These are exposures of radio frequencies that over time, especially the chronic exposure, and that was the whole point of wearing radon badges. You don't know until you actually submit your badge and find out whether or not you are capable of being exposed to that radiation anymore.
Mr. Beebe, could you got about 30 seconds. Could you wrap it up, please?
I will quit right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to talk to cell towers? Any other issues related to them? Okay, seeing none, does the assembly have any questions, follow-up questions?
Can you just clarify what we can, like, you had said earlier, for the audience again, like just clarify what we can say and all
Okay,
that?
the assembly members may ask questions to clarify comments that were made, for sure. But that we need to refrain from making any kind of definitive statements which may affect, where we would vote later on. In other words, take a position now that you would have to retract later on. Does that help you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask for a couple things. There was a couple points that were made here tonight that I've made some notes here. I'm going to ask Tidal Network to specifically address them Monday night if they will. And if the assembly has any questions related to tonight, so forth, please send them to the clerk, by Monday, so that at least by Monday noon, so that we can give them to Tidal Networks. And to the best of my knowledge, they will be here. Is that, I've not seen any change. Have you, Becky? No, she should be here. Okay, thank you. And with that, I appreciate everybody coming, and let's see if we'll see what we can get. And I want to see, I think the assembly needs to follow up after that meeting in some shape or form that we have on Monday night. Maybe some will be clarified, maybe not. We'll see where that goes. But at least I will say that they are willing to come to the table with us. Okay, thank you for coming.